All right, so Jen Psaki, Biden's press secretary, has been developing this sort of weird cult following around her where a bunch of liberals seem to think that she's some moral arbiter of truth who does nothing but tell the truth about all of the stories that are going on. And really what her actual job is being a paid propagandist for Joe Biden. Her job is explicitly to make Joe Biden look good. So that may involve lying, that may involve distorting stories. And I'm going to show you a clip here that is a perfect example of this because she basically completely bald-faced lied about the current situation in Israel and Palestine, and just tells complete fabrications about Joe Biden's position on this issue, and in the meantime also denies the reality on the ground that Israel is committing widespread war crimes all over the place, left and right, that we're going to get into. But this is what she had to say when asked a very mild question to basically just condemn war crimes, and she still could not even manage to do that much. So here's what she had to say.
Thanks so much for taking my question. Does President Biden think that there are any war crimes being committed right now in the Middle East? There are some experts who told the New York Times that they think that there could have been war crimes on both sides.
We're not going to be making an assessment of that from here. Our objective is on taking every step we can to reduce the violence, to de-escalate the situation on the ground, to save lives, to ensure that we are bringing some stability back on the ground.
I mean, just to follow up, is the White House at all, I guess maybe, or is the president at all concerned just about the number of civilians that are being killed? That's why some of these experts are telling the New York Times that these are war crimes.
Well, I would say, Mish, that in the readouts that we put out this weekend, we included, and as I've noted a little bit earlier in the briefing, his concern about the lives lost. Every life lost is a tragedy, and certainly that's why we are eager to de-escalate the violence on the ground, bring an end to the conflict, so that more lives can be saved.
Okay, so I don't know how else to say this. Literally every single thing that she just said is a straight up goddamn lie. It is a as transparent a lie as you could possibly give. They do not care. Joe Biden, his administration, do not care about Palestinians that are being slaughtered every single day. They simply do not care. And the idea that his administration so far has been pushing for peace, has been pushing for a ceasefire and to reduce civilian casualties is an absolute lie. Over the last week, the U.S. blocked UN statement for a third time. 3 times in 1 week, the United States government was the sole outlier in the international community that blocked a resolution that would have called for a ceasefire. So Hamas has agreed to multiple potential ceasefires that were on the table. It has been Israel and the United States that have refused to adopt those ceasefire proposals. So they are the ones who want the continued violence. And not only that, but for her to say that they care about reducing the civilian casualties, that they're not going to make an assessment about war crimes on the ground. Of course they're making assessments about war crimes on the ground. How do I know that? Because they've already condemned Hamas multiple times. That's their default position, is to say Israel has a right to defend themselves against what? They have a right to defend themselves from Hamas indiscriminately launching rockets into Israeli civilian centers. That is a war crime being committed by Hamas. And yet, somehow the Joe Biden administration only figures out a way to condemn Hamas in this situation while completely ignoring the overwhelmingly more destructive war crimes that have been committed at a much larger scale by Israel. Here are just a couple examples. This was one of the most recent ones. A heinous crime. Israeli airstrikes damage Gaza's only coronavirus testing lab. They have damaged more than 18 hospitals. Okay? Here are the details. Israeli airstrikes in the center of the occupied Gaza Strip on Monday caused severe damage to the territory's lone coronavirus testing lab and the offices of the Palestinian Ministry of Health, an attack that was immediately condemned as a war crime. Citing eyewitnesses to the bombing, Middle East Eye reported that Israeli warplanes hit the 6-story Ghazi al-Shawra building with at least 3 missiles, completely destroying the upper floors. Middle East Eye noted that the bombing damaged dozens of adjacent buildings, including Gaza's main coronavirus laboratory, an orphanage, a female high school, and the Palestinian Ministry of Health. That's not the only one. Here's another one that we've been covering over the last couple of days. Israel's attack on the press building draws condemnations. They bombed a press building that was housing the Associated Press, Al Jazeera, among many other outlets, as well as Palestinian residents. They have been leveling residential buildings left and right. They are destroying people's homes left and right. They attacked media. Okay, they attacked hospitals, they attacked orphanages, they attacked refugee camps. These are all blatant out in the open war crimes, it doesn't take much to recognize it or come out and condemn it, regardless if it's coming from Hamas or if it's coming from Israel. So for them to just sit back behind this wall of, oh, well, we're gonna pretend to be neutral in this situation, you're not fucking neutral. Joe Biden, I just covered the story yesterday. Joe Biden is trying to push through a $700 million weapon sale to Israel right now, weapons that will then be used against Palestinian children. He is not neutral in this situation. He is actively choosing and defending the side of the oppressors. He is actively choosing and defending the side of the people who are committing a genocide and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian people. That is exactly what Joe Biden is doing here, and yet Jen Psaki is perfectly willing to get up in front of a camera and be a complete hack, a political propagandist on behalf of the ethnic cleansers. This is just as disgusting as it possibly gets. We can go into another clip. Let's hear what else she had to say about this.
President Biden said last Thursday that Israel had a right to defend itself and that its actions thus far were not a significant overreaction. After the events of the past few days, does the president still believe that Israel's actions have been proportionate?
Well, first, Josh, let me remind people that the president also did 2 calls over the weekend that we did readouts of. And in those calls, he stressed the need for Hamas to cease firing rockets into Israel and affirmed, again, Israel's right to defend itself against terrorist attacks.
Okay, understand what she just said. The question was, is Joe Biden thinking that these are proportionate responses to the rockets that Hamas launched? And her response is to say, Hamas has the responsibility to initiate the ceasefire. Hamas already agreed to a ceasefire. It was Israel that blocked the ceasefire, and she's sitting up here acting as if it's the other way around. This is a straight up lie.
I would note from the reports there have been more than 3,000 rockets that have been shot from Hamas into Israel over the last several days. He also expressed his
The overwhelming majority of which, and by the way, I absolutely do not support Hamas launching rockets into Israeli civilian centers, obviously, but 99.9% of these rockets are being intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome, or they're just landing out in a field. The death toll on the Israeli side versus the Palestinian side, which we're going to get into in a second, is not even comparable. The people in Gaza do not have an Iron Dome protecting them. So if Hamas launches 3,000 rockets at Israel and 90+% of them are intercepted by the Iron Dome, and then Israel responds by flattening residential buildings and buildings that house media infrastructure, these are not comparable attacks. It's not proportionate. Continuing.
is concerned that this current period of conflict has tragically claimed the lives of Israeli and Palestinian civilians, including children, and he raised concerns about the safety of journalists, including those who had to leave the building where the Associated Press was based, and reinforced the need to ensure their protection. So how we are looking at this from our standpoint is that our focus, our goal, every single action we take, every statement we make is with the objective of reducing the violence and bringing an end to the conflict on the ground. There are times in diplomacy where we'll need to keep those conversations quieter, where we won't read out every component of it. But that is our objective, and that is the prism through which every action and every comment is being made.
Again, a bald-faced lie, completely a fucking lie, top to bottom, detached from reality. I mean, listen, they're trying to take this middle ground approach of, oh, well, we really support a ceasefire, we really support peace and reducing civilian casualties, while unconditionally supporting the side that is rejecting a ceasefire, while unconditionally supporting the side that is doing an ethnic cleansing. Let's look at the statistics. The toll of this conflict so far. 10 people were killed in Hamas rocket and missile attacks. 2 people died in civil unrest on the Israeli side. Okay, 12 people have died. Obviously condemn Hamas for those killings. They're war crimes. Now let's get to the Palestinian side of this. Deaths in occupied territories. 212 in the Gaza Strip. 20 people killed in clashes related to Israeli security forces in the West Bank. 212, okay? Many of which are children, okay? So multiple times more children on the Palestinian side have been killed than total on the Israeli side. This is not a comparable fight. It's not a fight at all. It's not a war. This is a one-sided slaughter. Okay, that's the only way that you can accurately define what's actually happening on the ground. And yet, Here comes Jen Psaki and the Biden administration pretending as if they're taking a neutral side. They're not taking a neutral side. They are 100% taking the side of Israel. They refuse to condemn them for killing, massacring innocent civilians, and they continue to repeat the propaganda lines of, oh, well, Israel is just purely defending themselves. Really? When they're overwhelmingly, the majority, the vast majority of the people that they are killing are innocent civilians, that's self-defense. It's that self-defense. I mean, it's despicable. It's ridiculous. It blows my mind that so many people are willing to be complicit in this, especially with a guy like Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu is the Trump equivalent of Israel, if not further right and further nationalistic and further racist than Donald Trump is. It makes absolutely no sense to me that people can have such a vehement hatred for Donald Trump, and a justified one, but then they turn around and they support Bibi Netanyahu like he's like some sort of a moral actor in this situation. He's absolutely not. He's a batshit insane war criminal, and we see what's happening on the ground right now. The assault continues, and this is what's going to happen into the future. Okay, this is what happens every couple of years when this conflict flares up. Israel goes in with their strategy of what's called mowing the lawn, okay, as despicable as that phrase is. They say mowing the lawn, and what they mean by that, or what they say is intended by this phrase is, oh, we're going down and reducing Hamas's capabilities over time. What they really mean is they're going in and indiscriminately bombing and slaughtering the Palestinian people within the Gaza Strip, and that's their goal. Every couple of years they do this to terrorize the people who are living in Gaza, who are shut off from the rest of the world. There's an ongoing blockade. People don't have access to water, don't have access to food, don't have access to education, and Israel comes in every couple of years and destroys their infrastructure, doesn't give them the ability to rebuild it, and they're trapped in this open air prison in Gaza where they have nowhere to go. They're literally not allowed to leave the Strip, and Israel just does this every couple of years, and then Joe Biden or whoever's in office in the United States will allow it, will be complicit in it, will encourage it, and then eventually this violence will die down. Israel will pull, their airstrikes back slightly, and then the media will go completely silent on it, and nothing structurally or fundamentally will change about the situation. There will be an ongoing ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, and this is just going to continue happening. So we're just going to keep seeing this cycle of violence every couple of years. If this is how it continues, if our pathetic media is not willing to call them out on these blatant lies like the ones that Jen Psaki was just telling, then we're not going to progress anywhere on this issue. But this is where we're at right now. This is Joe Biden's administration. This is exactly who he is. And when people tell you who they are, believe them. He is absolutely 100% endorsing an ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people right now.